This is a web-based call, so we are operating under the following procedures. This session is being audio recorded. Please be advised that today we are also recording the video of the proceedings. We will not use the chat feature in this meeting. To ensure sound quality, the default rule for this meeting is that everyone will remain on mute. Commissioners and staff will generally remain on mute except when speaking or voting. This meeting is open to the public, but is not a public hearing. Therefore, no members of the public may speak unless are specifically invited to do so. If a member of the public creates an audio or video disruption, they may be manually ejected from the meeting upon recommendation of the staff or the chair. We appreciate your attendance at this meeting. Should you have any questions about this process, you may call our staff at 860-444-5813 after the meeting has ended.
Good evening, commission members and other folks attending. I'd like to call to order. We have a quorum. Were they all regular?
We're gonna seat
Julie.
Seat Julie for Dave Lurch.
Okay.
All right, Julie?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Like to go to item number 2, it's the approval of the September 23rd, 2021 meeting.
I make a motion to approve the minutes of the September 23rd meeting. This is Julie.
Second.
Seconded by Geneva. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries.
I would like to note, it looks like there's a typo on the second page.
Okay,
The third line down, Attorney Branch addressed the commission. I think it should be is in, they were in. Third line down, well, third paragraph, Attorney Branch addressed the commission, noting that the application is in, I would think, not
Right.
in.
correction noted. Vote stands.
Thank you.
Ended. Going to application review, C-21-11, 969 Hartford Turnpike, multifamily residential development. Is there somebody here to represent the applicant?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, for the record, Mark Brantz, B-R-A-N-S-C. I'm representing the applicant. This was received at your last meeting. We made a brief presentation and overview. Since then, we have gotten some staff comments. Some of those relate to zoning issues rather than wetlands issues, but we can briefly review the relevant comments for you and what our responses are to those. And I don't know if the commission wants to schedule a site walk. My understanding is that a couple of members did walk the property. But if you want a formal site walk, that's something we can talk about. And I think I'm going to ask Darren Overton from SLR Associates to review the staff comments. And then after that, I'm going to ask Megan Raymond to specifically address the question of significant activity. And then last, I'll ask if your staff, Ms. Fitzgerald, has anything to add. So at this point, I'll turn it over to Darren Overton from SLR Associates.
Hello, everyone. Darren Overton from SLR Associates.
Hello, Darren. How come you got so old so quick?
I blame it on the 3 kids I have.
They'll do it.
Yeah, that's a challenge, particularly with 2 in high school going through COVID.
Wait till college comes. That's a challenge too, paying for that.
Yep, one's a senior. We're starting that process now. So we gave an overview at the last meeting. Maureen, I'm not sure if I have the ability to share my screen, but I can bring up the existing conditions plan.
Give us a second, Dan.
And just go over some of the details of you know, how
Should be
we,
share screen now.
okay, looks like I can. Let me know when everybody can see it.
We're there.
Okay, so this is the existing conditions plan that we had presented last time. It shows the boundary in yellow, the wetland, delineated wetlands in green. It shows the upland review area in the magenta color. We have the wetlands over here on the south side of the site. North, as you can see from the arrow here, is up and to the left. And then we also have this water course, which is slightly off of the property to the north with an upland review area that extends onto the property. And we also have what's interesting is this pretty large power line corridor that runs along our eastern boundary. You can see over here is a existing retail development and some of the stormwater management behind that. And then we have Hartford Turnpike and the intersection with Cross Road along our frontage to the west. So part of the consideration that we had in designing this project, and you can see the contours are on here. The high point is up here, kind of in the northeast corner, up along the power lines. We've got a ridge here that slopes down to the south towards the wetlands. There's, you can see where the contours tighten up. There's a steep slope coming down here to a broad central valley, another ridge as we move farther to the west. And then you see there's another pretty dramatic slope going down towards Hartford Turnpike and the existing convenience store gas station that's over here in the northwest corner. So initially in looking at, we look at the overall property, the existing site constraints. My staff in designing this works with Megan very carefully to understand areas of wetlands that we need to protect on site, what the functions and values are of those wetlands. And we work through a scenario of different options. We've been working with John Hendel, who's part of the ownership, who is also in the meeting tonight. And we want to achieve their goals while also respecting the site constraints of the site. And one of the prominent factors beyond the wetlands here is access to the site. So logically, we're not going to try and climb up off a Hartford Turnpike straight up this steep slope. Ideally, if any of you have been out there on the site, you'll see there's actually an old, probably logging road that comes up down here where Hartford Turnpike is actually at grade coming in here. And the logging road kind of comes up through the valley where the grades are gentle. I think, as I recall, there's some paths that work their way out this way towards the knoll here and towards the power lines. But ideally, if nothing else was a factor, we would take access right here and bring the road up. However, this is a Hartford Turnpike, it's a DOT road, and recognizing that we have to deal with traffic constraints as well, the ideal place to bring the roadway in here is right at the intersection at Cross Road. If we tried to move that further, this offset is really not enough from that existing signalized intersection to get an approval from DOT to bring the road up here where the grades would be, most favorable. So we have to meet this intersection here, and we have to make our way up this slope. And we need to design a roadway that is, generally accessible by the future residents. But we've also worked, and John Hendel has been very instrumental in working with the fire department on this. We have to deal with emergency services access as well. And so the design of that roadway has to be at such a grade that it's not an issue for emergency services. And we designed it as a boulevard for that purpose. So I'll just quickly jump to the proposed rendering here, and you can see how we've teed up that intersection with Cross Road. Our traffic engineers have been working with DOT as part of the future approvals for this through the DOT OSTA process to make modifications to that signal and bring the access road up here. So this intersection, while it's also subject to approval by town staff, it will ultimately be subject to approval by the DOT because they own the right of way here. And we've designed this to come up at a relatively gentle grade. I think it's about 8% in order to try and meet the grades here. We went through a number of iterations of grading of this project. We actually considered some alternatives that went up on the knoll here. We had units at one point up on the knoll, but we worked with the architect. You'll see these buildings right here are aligned with this kind of slope right here. So they kind of back into that, and they're called what we call 2-3 splits. So it's a 3-story front with a 2-story back. So the foundation actually steps up that hillside to minimize earthwork. And in doing that, we were able to pull the density down and the unit layout down into the Central Valley area and into the flatter parts of the site and be able to preserve part of this as open space, which we've planned some walking trails through there. We've noted for planning and zoning, there's a dog park that's planned in that area. And it'll be, you know, kind of a wooded walking area for the residents, kind of passive recreation area. There are active recreation areas with the clubhouse and the pool here. You see the units kind of surround the central roadway network with only one unit sitting in the middle here. We've also stepped the foundations on these 2 units. As you recall from existing conditions, this hillside kind of slopes down towards Hartford Turnpike. So the backside of these units actually is a 3-4 split where it steps down the hillside, where you actually have 3 stories here and 2 stories in front. So again, we're trying to respect the grades on the site and fitting this into the site. You'll see that we do have upland review area impacts, which we've noted in our application. Majority of them, part of it is associated with the grading for the access road. Again, we went through several iterations of design with this to kind of optimize the grades and the location of that, to minimize earthwork and also make an effort to avoid any impact in the upland review area. But the ultimate design, which fit best, did have some upland review area impact for the grading, but we still leave a fairly significant natural wooded buffer to the wetlands there. The other impacts on the south side are all related to the stormwater basins. Inevitably, the stormwater basins have to be located in the low part of the site in order to capture the runoff from the development. Particularly, we want to capture as much of the impervious surface on the project as possible in order to run those through water quality treatment before we discharge to the wetlands. So you'll see here the majority of our upland review area impact is associated with those basins. I'll note that we do have no direct wetland impact as part of this. Our discharges do come up close. We want to get those into some of the flatter parts of the topography to discharge, to have non-erosive velocities coming out of them. And then the final impacts I want to note is up here in order to fit in the development of the project. We do have some yard areas that do extend into the upland review area. There's a very small watershed on the site that actually drains north and a portion of the site that drains to the west. So there is some of these yard areas that would continue to drain toward there. But again, we have a pretty reasonable natural wooded buffer that will remain there. As far as stormwater management, you'll see on here the darker green areas are stormwater management basins. You'll see some smaller ones like here adjacent to the units, here and here. These are bioretention basins that will collect runoff from the roof areas. The runoff will drain into those. While these aren't necessarily sized for infiltration, they have a biofilter media in them, which will allow for some natural infiltration, whatever the natural soil conditions allow. They're really designed for first flush storage of the inch of runoff from the roof. So we disconnect the roofs. And then we have a collection system in the light blue here, which is a pipe and catch basin system. We have our first stormwater management basin here, surface basin is here. We have another one in series here. And then we have a third one here in our discharge point here. These all kind of tie in together. And then this basin here actually collects the runoff from the lower part of our roadway and actually picks up some of the runoff off of Hartford Turnpike that goes into a grass swale, comes into here and then overflows into kind of a broad swale. And you can see the shape of the wetland delineation here actually wraps around and defines that broad swale. So we discharge in the upland part of that, which overflows into the wetland, ultimately makes its way to right here is a cross culvert under Hartford Turnpike, making its way over to Jordan Brook. So I think I mentioned it earlier, we've been working on this project for a number of years. We've had a number of meetings over the years, I want to say the past 2 years with town staff. Town staff has guided us in the ultimate design of this project, and particularly in the stormwater management. We recognize this is in the Jordan Brook watershed, which is part of a trout stream, and temperature and other pollutants are an issue. So we've tailored these basins, looking at the selection criteria in the Connecticut Stormwater Management Manual. couple of these basins, the main design of these is designed as extended detention micropool basins. We have one basin based on the watershed that would be considered a pocket pond. And as much as possible, we've tried to disconnect the clean runoff from the roofs into the bioretention before it overflows here. And then also, based on our soil testing on the site, we did a number of test pits. We found in the upper part of the broad valley here that we had our best permeable soils, and we designed the grading so that the grading here is in a fill, and we're able to put some concrete galleries with open bottoms here. And we actually did design a storage system here for detention and infiltration that will allow for infiltration into the ground and groundwater recharge as part of that. So we did investigate the soils on site. We took into consideration a lot of the existing site constraints as well as input from town staff. And we carefully designed this as best we could to minimize the impact area and minimize the disturbance to what we had identified as natural resources that required protection. Number one is the Jordan Brook watershed itself. We paid careful attention to that for the water stormwater management design. We did go back and look at the Jordan Brook watershed management plan as part of that, not only the DEP manual. And then we carefully followed Megan's guidance in regard to what she had seen on the ground as far as the wetland delineation. And Megan did prepare a soil report and a wetland impact assessment as part of the project. Before we submitted our application, we did submit all of the submission information into town staff. Maureen was kind enough to give it a thorough review and provided a list of comments back to us. We actually did make a number of final changes in relation to that. And we submitted a comment response letter that I believe has been distributed to the commission members, where we detailed out our responses and some of the changes that we made to the plans that basically shaped the final set of plans that were submitted as part of the application. So we've submitted what I believe is a complete package of information. We believe it's been thoroughly vetted through town staff. As Mark had mentioned, we are going through the same process with planning and zoning. We did submit preliminary plans to the town planner, who has routed those through town staff. We do have a number of comments left to address as part of our submission to planning and zoning, which we haven't made yet. We wanted to make sure we address all the concerns of the Wetlands Commission before we move forward with that. And I think that's all I have as far as additional detail for tonight, but I would, of course, be happy to answer any questions that the commission has. But for now, I'd like to turn it over to Megan. She probably has more relevant information that this commission would like to hear other than the civil engineer's design. So Megan, if you'd like to fill in some of the details that I may have missed, please go ahead.
Sure. Thanks a lot, Darren. Good evening, everybody. For the record, my name is Megan Raymond. I'm a professional wetland scientist, registered soil scientist, and certified floodplain manager at SLR. And I'm the principal scientist here on the Wetlands and Waterways lead. I've been involved with the project since 2017. We flagged the wetlands on the site in 2017. At that time, we identified 5.5 acres of palustrin forested wetlands in the southern portion of the site. That's area that outlined in green, in addition to that offsite watercourse that we identified and mapped that exists to the left of the page here. As we talked about at our last meeting, the wetlands on the site are comprised of a soil, a parent material comprised of till. It's a glacial till parent material. We see a lot of structure within this wetland system, nice forested canopy, full shrub layer, nice ground cover, a lot of rocky outcrops and features within the wetland system. But you can see how we've designed the site plan to really take the physical attributes, the physical characteristics of these wetlands into consideration in laying out the design and allowing for the advancement of a site plan that really is able to balance the needs of the site, the needs of the community as it relates to the housing, but also manages the high function and maintains the high function of the wetland systems within this really valuable watershed, Jordan Brook. So within our 35.7 acre site, we have wetlands that are approximately 15%, but But again, they're in a nice position to allow for the management of both uses. As Darren mentioned, we have no direct wetland impacts with the project. We're able to navigate the grading and the stormwater management design to avoid direct impacts. We're also managing indirect impacts, both in the long term with the comprehensive stormwater management that Darren just described, as well as the short term with our sedimentation and erosion control. And those are basically the stalwarts of wetland protection when we look at a project such as this, where we have a little bit of work within the upland review, but obviously it's not extensive. I think it's approximately in total an acre between the two wetland areas, the offsite system and the onsite. So a very small, we're able to kind of minimize, we are able to minimize our work within the upland review and really keep it confined to portions of the project that are unavoidable. You know, we need to put the access where it exists, to the south of the rock cut, or a little, just is kind of managing that rock cut placement and lining up with crossroad there, as well as our stormwater management. You do want that on the lower end of your system. We like to see these basins, surface basins that are going to be vegetated and provide that nice buffer between our upland, our work in the upland and our developed envelope, and then our natural wetland system. So it's for all of these reasons that we're able to maintain the high function and physical characteristics of the wetland. And we look at the site plan and look at these attributes in relation to your regulations in section 2.3.2 and significant activities. You have 8 items that are itemized there. And it's our opinion that this project would not be considered a significant impact to wetlands, given the avoidance of direct wetland impacts, the ability to manage water quality, water quantity with the comprehensive stormwater management, as well as our robust sedimentation and erosion control measures during construction. And it should be, we can add that there will be another review of the stormwater plan. We will need a stormwater general permit from DEEP, given that we do have greater than 5 acres of disturbance on the property. As well, we're able to incorporate, just finally in summation, we're able to incorporate a nice open space area that's going to occupy the eastern and the southern portion of the site. That open space is about 13.6 acres or 39% of the site, which is almost double what your zoning would prescribe here. I think the zoning would be 20%. We're up at 39%. Almost 40% of the site will be deeded or will be protected as open space. So that has been our evaluation. Again, it's been an iterative process with our design team, our stormwater, with relative to stormwater management, to maintain the nice wetland corridor out here and maintain water quality within Jordan Brook. We're pleased to have your audience this evening and would be happy to answer any questions that you may have. So thanks a lot for your time. And I'm not sure if Attorney Brantz would like any closing remarks, but at your direction, we're pleased to answer any questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Megan, and thank you, Darren. And I should have opened by introducing you and mentioning, of course, John Hendel is here. At your first meeting, John was on the road and was only able to participate audio, but tonight he's able to join us virtually. And I must say, I love these virtual meetings where Darren can actually walk us through the plan with the cursor and you can all see it. I'm hoping that even after COVID, we continue to use this model because it really allows everybody a front row seat on what the plans are and how you're being walked through them. I think the only thing I would ask, Megan, do you want to specifically address, I know you've reviewed the definition of significant activity, both in Waterford and statewide. Can you think of any reason why this would trigger any of the tests for significant activity?
Well, no, as I just described, the A through H in section 2.3.2 of your regulations specify those activities that would be considered to be significant. And I mean, if you'd like to walk through them, we certainly can. But essentially, there are no attributes within that list that would be consistent with the work that we're performing on the site. And that is achieved both through the management or the avoidance of direct wetland impacts and the management of potential indirect impacts with stormwater management and sedimentation and erosion control.
Thank you, Megan. I think that's really, all that we have to say right now. I don't know if Ms. Fitzgerald has anything she'd like to add. I know we've been working with her and she may have comments for your consideration. And of course, we're open to questions.
Maureen, do you have any questions?
I have no questions or comments at this time. Thank you, Attorney Brantz.
Commissioners, do you have any questions?
I'm good. Wade talking.
Okay, hearing that nobody has any comments, the commission's got to decide about significance. Discussion on significance.
I would think just for the formality of this, I think the commission should consider, based on the testimony tonight that we have in front of us and what we listened to last meeting as well, that because if the finding of significant impact will trigger the need for a public hearing and timeframes and certain protocols for your decision-making going forward, I would recommend that if you were ready, just so make a motion that you find that this is not a significant activity and doesn't require a public hearing. Unless you find otherwise that you think the amount of activity in the upland review area would be of interest to the public.
I'll make the motion that I don't view this as a significant impact of project to the wetlands.
I
I'll
second
second
that.
that motion.
Who was that? Who seconded?
I got Geneva first.
Geneva.
And if staff can just clarify, and you feel it's in the public interest that we would need to hold a hearing?
I don't really think, if the public wants to petition, they can do so. I don't think it's in the public interest myself. If someone petitions, I think that shows the interest. I mean, I'm comfortable with it.
We haven't had any public interest demonstrated at town hall yet.
Well, we're good then, I think, from my standpoint.
Any other comments by commission members before we vote? Signifying the commission is ready to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Abstain? Motion carries.
You're opposed?
Hmm?
Are you right?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so
Well,
just for a follow-up then, so if anyone still would like to walk out there, there's a pretty good path. As Mr. Overton had pointed out, there's an old logging trail and access road from when they did Test Holes way even before 2015. That you can get in, or if not, feel free to call me. I'll make sure you can get there in a town car and you get some colors on. Because people are hunting, so just be aware of that. And staff will start drafting up final considerations and findings based on my discussions with the group from SLR and any other comments you might have directed to staff. If that suits your
Sure.
fancy.
yeah, please send if you have some comments for staff to consider, please send it to staff.
We appreciate your time tonight in considering this. And if anybody does want to go out to the site, I would offer that we would certainly welcome a tour of it. If anybody wants a tour guide, I'd be happy to meet them out there and go for a walk in the woods.
Thank you for the offer.
Thank you, Darren.
We usually go independent with town staff, so we don't have to hold the public hearing out in the field. Okay.
It was your pleasure.
You're welcome. And good night.
Good night.
Going on
Thank you.
to the next item of
Thank you.
business.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your time.
Paul,
Good night, thanks.
Give us a chance to just.
Okay.
Yeah, he has to unshare it.
Unshared, Darren. We need the screen back.
Will do.
Thanks, hon.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Good night, you.
Sure.
Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
Darren?
okay, we're going to go on to the next application, C-21-12, 384 and 394 Lord's Avenue Extension. site plan modification and new clubhouse. Is there somebody here to represent the applicant?
Yes, good evening. For the record, my name's Brandon Hanfield with Yantic River Consultants. And happy to share my screen if that works, or we can go with what we have on the screen. It's up to you guys. If I share my screen, I can probably use the cursor and then kind of
Yeah.
guide through what we're looking at.
Yeah, he should be able to share over mine.
Excellent. I think this should do it, but all right, can everybody see my screen?
You're good.
Excellent,
Hey,
beautiful.
No, hold on.
Hang on, I think that's still ours.
See my cursor?
There you go.
Yes.
All right. Again, for the record, Brandon Hanfield representing the applicant Waterford Woods LLC. We gave a pretty detailed presentation 3 weeks ago at your last meeting. Since then, we have received comments from Maureen, and we did go through them, provided some preliminary responses to those. So I'll give a brief recap of the existing site, what's going on today, what has been approved, and what we are requesting in this modification. And then I'll focus mainly on the comments and any concerns that the commissioner staff may have and our responses to those comments. So just to recap, what you have in front of you is the existing conditions plan. So it's the survey overlaid on top of the 2019 aerial. Outlined in orange is the property boundaries, about 26.6 acres. To your left is Willets Avenue Extension, which is north. Boston Post Road intersection would be the bottom left off your screen, to the northwest, and to the south would be the railroad corridor. What you see here in shaded in teal are the inland wetlands delineated by James Sipperly, certified soil scientist. And you'll see generally two separate systems. They're barely separated, but they are. So to the north, you have one system here, which was delineated in separate flags. And then again, to the south, you have a secondary system. The northern system is associated with Fanger Brook, which is generally the northwest corner, crosses over the northwest corner of our property. That does continue in a southerly direction and reconnects off our property. So ultimately, this is one larger system that flows down to the west underneath Minor Lane, which would be down off your page to the bottom right. In terms of development, or actually I'll say the 100-foot upland review area is shown also in teal in a dark dashed line. And then one item I wanted to point out, James Sipperly is not able to join us. He apologizes. He's had some medical issues that he's been dealing with, and they've been ongoing for well over 2 months now. He was unavailable to really get into this, but I was able to speak with him today about one of the comments, and it was related to a possible vernal pool. And I wanted to kind of flush out what he saw when he was out there, because he was there in August, which is not ideal timing for vernal pools. And he identified this area here on your screen. And if you can see my cursor, there's a kind of a shaded dark area in the aerial. And he identified that area as having standing water. And you could, see some species that would be representative of a vernal pool. He identified that in his letter to you under the former application C-20-19. Knowing that we weren't going in the wetlands or near the wetlands at that time, we didn't flush it out. But he did acknowledge that there's standing water there. It's representative of a vernal pool. It may be more of a permanent pool of water and less of a temporary, so maybe more of an ephemeral pool. But he did say there is a higher quality wetland within the delineated wetland. He also mentioned that there's a historical stone wall between his delineation and that pool of water. It's not showing up on our survey because it is in the wetlands, but so the area he pointed out, so this delineation here in the northwest corner, basically he said if you kept walking in about 30 to 50 feet, there is a separation or almost buried wall, and beyond that, you kind of get into that standing water. So he basically identified a linear feature that's man-made, and beyond that, you get into those muck soils, flooded soils, and identifiable species. What I'll do is go down to, again, what was approved under application C-20-19. This is that plan that was presented to you. And a few things I'll point out: that the access point to Willets Avenue. Again, our driveway continues through for a loop, serving 3 multifamily buildings and associated amenity space. Regulated activities at that time were stormwater related and a portion of building B. So this is detention pond 01A, which is within the regulated area. And then 02A to the east of building C also discharges into the regulated area. As part of that approval, there was a non-encroachment boundary that was established that basically parallels our clearing limits, and I can zoom in slightly just to see that. So you can see that non-encroachment boundary is the dashed line. It basically follows our clearing limits. That continues to the south of building C and terminates at the property line. We did have a limit of temporary disturbance as part of that application, which is shown in this hatched line here. That encroaches further towards the inland wetlands, not into them. And a lot of that work was related to removal of historical debris, bricks, stockpiles of wood, all sorts of things from the past 50, 60 years of disturbance. We went in there, removed those piles, and the plan is to seed and restore those areas with conservation seed mix. So once that seed mix takes and erosion controls are removed, the non-encroachment line would be this dashed line that parallels those in the tree line. All right, moving on to what we're proposing. So in terms of the original development, it remains generally unchanged. What we are adding on is we're extending the existing driveway to serve a new clubhouse that's located in the southeast corner of the uplands, and it terminates at a cul-de-sac or a paved cul-de-sac for emergency vehicles to turn around, as well as residents. What I want to just briefly touch on again, it's related to one of the comments we received, is what we are proposing for a non-encroachment and what we are having for encroachment areas. So what I quickly did was overlay the original non-encroachment area on this plan so that you can visualize what has changed. So up behind building C, you'll see the non-encroachment area that was originally approved is in orange. Again, I can zoom into that. Bit slow, but so this is the original non-encroachment area here. And that hatched line is that restoration area. And what you'll see is we are proposing to I show the shifted non-encroachment line in green. And what that does is it parallels the clearing limits that were approved as part of the gravity sewer main. It's a separate application we submitted for connecting out to the sewer along the railroad. And one of the conditions of that was that, we have continued maintenance of that utility corridor. So in this application, I included those activities in the disturbance tables, just so it's one complete application that shows all the activity on this site. And I do show the non-encroachment line being shifted over to that limited disturbance so that we do demarcate the existing vegetation that was left, and the people that maintain it know not to encroach further towards the wetlands. One other thing I'll note in this area is we did change the shape of this detention basin. The reason we did that is there's 3 large oak trees that we found, and before they got there with the clearing, we marked them so they didn't take them down. It's a 42-inch oak, a 48-inch oak, and a 32-inch oak or 36-inch oak tree. So rather than take those down and fill in this triangle, which you can see by the limit of encroachment here, we went around the trees and kept all that area undisturbed. So that's really the only change. So it reconfigured the shape of the basin slightly, but the limit of disturbances, the general grading in this area really hasn't changed, and we certainly aren't encroaching any further beyond what has been approved for either application. Moving down to the proposed clubhouse site. Nothing has changed since what you've seen it, but I did add a few items in here related to the comments and for discussion purposes with the commission and what our thoughts are. So again, the clubhouse itself hasn't changed. The cul-de-sac hasn't changed. The first detention basin, which is 03A, is in that northerly system. It's situated here, A, so that it can take the runoff from our road, which has a low point just before you get to the clubhouse or just to the northwest of the clubhouse, and discharge into this basin. So it's long and linear to keep as much separation as we can, while also preserving a rocky mountain and significant vegetation there. This ultimately discharges to the low point that is located adjacent to the wetlands. Similarly, on the south side of the site, we have a stormwater feature. This is 03B to the southwest corner. This is a long linear feature that was put in essence, to capture all of the runoff from the clubhouse and the proposed road. So the clubhouse discharges to the start of this swale. The cul-de-sac currently discharges at the end of the cul-de-sac and enters the same swale where it is treated, ultimately filtered, and discharges to a low point that's at the southwest corner of the site. So this, as a representative, is elevation 16. Elevation 18 is approximately at the wetlands. As you make your way up here, you're at approximately elevation 20 and above. So we basically carried a very flat, long, broad swale down to the low point in the southwest corner. Let's see. So if, are there any questions on the proposed layout, or I'm happy to go through the comments and some of our discussions and how we're addressing them, or I'll leave it up to the commission's preference here.
Are there any comments by commission members?
Right. Julie here. Can you explain or describe the that in the upper right corner of the map on the page, on the paper that we're looking at? Yeah, that area there. What?
Yep. So what we have here at the back of the clubhouse, and I'll start with this. In the clubhouse, we have a dog washing area. Dogs are very popular in these, so we wanted to promote people to have areas to take their dogs. So first, there's a dog washing station inside the clubhouse. As you leave that dog washing station, you get into a more formal dog park area that's fenced in, grass maintained, flatter slopes where residents can let their dogs off leash. And what we wanted to show was a natural dog park area as well, where that fencing terminates into more of a flexible green fencing that can meander through the existing trees and create an enclosed area that is actually a natural habitat. So rather than mowing a huge area that has no shade, the intent was to provide a more natural area with a fence that meanders through and is much less formal. What we show is selective clearing within this area. So the larger trees won't be cut, but the scrubby areas underneath would be to allow a more open feel. We saw one of the comments from Maureen about pulling that in to provide a minimum of 50 feet. So there's no disturbance of the underbrush either. And I talked to the applicant, and that is something we can do where the fence keeps that 50-foot separation. So there's no there's no clearing whatsoever of the underbrush. So that is something we will accommodate, is pulling in our fence. And what I show here is just for discussion is that the clearing limits and the fence line parallel that 50-foot separation. So we are agreeable to pull in this limited disturbance and reduce any encroachment into that 50-foot area. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that does. Thank you. And when you say green fence, do you mean like green as in trees and shrubs, or what?
That's a really good question. No, it's actually a green square fence that, so it wouldn't be like a 6-foot high white vinyl fence. It's a green box wire fence that kind of fades away, but it provides that barrier. I don't have the name off the top of my head, but it is a 6-foot high green box wire style fence that has much less formal posts, but provides that enclosure they need for the dogs.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Could you please go over the comments? And your response?
Sure can. And I have those open for me here in the background, but the first comment was related to our soil scientist, James Sipley, signing this plan. I just want to reiterate, the wetland delineation is the same delineation that James Sipley did for our last application. He did sign that survey. It's the same survey we're using for this project, but I will add a certification block for Jim, and so he can sign this plan directly, but we are referring directly to that original survey. And again, Jim apologizes for not being able to be here, and I hope he's good enough for our next meeting. Comment number 2, the wetland impact table. I did have a conversation today with Maureen and made sure it's clear what we're trying to show the commission here. And what I'll do, again, I'll zoom into that table to show how we are presenting it. But the top of this table are the values that were approved by the commission in C-20-19. So these match what was approved. In the middle are the values that we're requesting as part of this application. So you'll see pluses here. And what that is the additional disturbances that are related to this application. So we have an additional 1.21 acres of permanent upland review area disturbance and an additional almost 14,000 square feet of temporary disturbance. We still have no direct disturbance on the wetlands. One thing that I did clarify, this note 4 should say note 3, which is right here. I apologize for that incorrect number, but the temporary restoration is solely related to the sewer corridor. So this area was not part of your original C-20-19 application that came later as part of the gravity sewer application. I included that temporary disturbance in this table just so that there was, again, a clear record or tabulation of what our disturbances would be. So we don't have any temporary disturbance related to the clubhouse. We're not accounting for any temporary disturbance. All of that 13,000 square feet or 14 is up here and related to that gravity sewer main. I think that pretty much clarifies. And then the last part of our table is the total impact on the regulated areas from this application. So you basically add the top to the middle and you get the bottom. And hopefully that clarifies what we have. Comment 4, the vernal pool. I touched on the existing conditions in my conversations with Mr. Sipley, where that vernal pool may be. Again, he identified this area here in the center of the northwesterly wetland as that area that he witnessed. We don't have any activity certainly within 100 feet of that. right now it's closer to 150 feet where we even have clearing. Certainly no impervious surfaces that are within or nearby that wetlands. And again, there is that linear feature through here that does provide a separation of even the internal wetlands from that ponded area. Comment number 5 that we have related to a limit of clearing and a limit of saw cut. And in my conversations, it became clear what the confusion may be on the plan submitted is we have this dashed line that's shown in green on your plan, so it's a little clearer. That dashed line matches the dashed line I used for a saw cut out in Willits Avenue as well. So my table or my legend says saw cut, but in reality, this is a simple delineation of what will be a recreation area. It goes all the way around the clubhouse and goes also all the way around the dog park, and in total is 2 acres. So everything, clubhouse, amenities, the dog park out back, as well as this open space totals 2 acres. The area that's not the clubhouse and not the dog park right now is an area that'll be cleared. It'll be grubbed. It'll be basically slightly regraded with topsoil and seeded, and it'll be maintained as lawn for outdoor recreation. Full disclosure, there are some plans for future residential development around this cul-de-sac. At this time, we don't have the level of design development where we could present that to the town, but there are future plans to have additional multifamily units out back here. This won't be prepared. So our plan is not to prepare a pad for them or do any large scale land disturbance activities. It's simply to clear for our stormwater down here, our cul-de-sac in the middle, limit our vegetation as much as we can. But full disclosure, there are intents of planning for future development in the back. Let's see. Comment number 6 is also related to this recreation area. And I can get to the grading plan to show that there's really no grading activities proposed. It's simply just a clearing exercise and planting grass. Comment number 7 was related to the cul-de-sac and possibly reducing impervious surfaces or increasing our low impact development standards. So what we can do, so right now this is a formal cul-de-sac. There is one drainage structure that we're collecting stormwater in and discharging it to a sediment forebay. As an additional measure, what we are proposing to do or will propose to do is remove the curbing so that the water sheet flows off of the paved area into a broad, very flat swale, which will collect and discharge to the same location, but the treatment will occur in the disconnection of the impervious surfaces from a formal drainage. So it'll run over vegetation before it enters into a collection system. Let's see, comment number 8 was related to our non-encroachment boundary. And what we are proposing on our plan now is in green or light green, and basically parallels the 50-foot separation. You can see that here from the inlet, delineated inland wetlands. There are a few locations where we get closer than 50 feet. So related to detention basin 03A, the discharge location is closer than 50 feet. And the same for 03B, that discharge location encroaches within 50 feet. And again, these are located with the low points of the wetlands in mind. And then same thing, what we discussed before is we do show the original approved non-encroachment boundary being shifted to parallel the approved clearing limits of the sewer line. And again, that'll allow future maintenance of that sewer corridor, which will be entirely planted with conservation seed mix. We discussed the dog park clearing, which is here, and we are planning on retracting the limits of that informal dog park and selective clearing to provide a full 50-foot buffer.
Brandon,
Yeah.
excuse me. Can I
Yes, go
ask
ahead.
you to go back, shift the map down to the lower left corner again? And,
Absolutely.
and talk about that limit of clearing that goes, is it necessary to go to 50 feet or can you stay 100 feet away?
So 100 feet away, if you look at the contours of 100 feet, we're elevated substantially by then. So the stormwater would end up being at elevation. See, this is about 26, 24. So to put it up here, yes, we would collect the cul-de-sac, but I could not collect the clubhouse and the drainage off of the patio behind. So that's why I had that long linear connection. And, you know, we could put a satellite area here, but even these grades, this is a 20, elevation 20, 22, 24 here. So we would be up in this area here. And again, I just can't get that drainage from here in the clubhouse. So ultimately I selected an area where I know the soils are good. I did soil testing around the perimeter of the site. The soils around the clubhouse aren't great. They're very rocky, very bony, not as gravelly. Once we cross to the rear here, these soils get very, very gravelly, good drainage. I sent them out for testing to the lab. I don't have the results back yet, but ultimately the better spot for filtering and drainage and infiltration is behind this area. So to the west of the cul-de-sac, this line here, all of these soils were better than the soils witnessed up front. So that was part of why I cited it back here.
Actually, I would thank you for that, but also on the very lower left portion, your proposed non-encroachment boundary at 50 feet.
Yes.
Can that be moved back to 100? Yeah, right there. That's what I'm talking
Right
about.
here. Yes, I simply did it as a 50-foot because that is in my mind. If I had to follow that out and hit the 100, I certainly could do that, acknowledging that any change to this plan within the 100 feet would come back to you regardless. So if we had to extend this to the 100-foot, certainly could do that.
Okay. Sorry to interrupt you, but thanks.
No,
That's
I appreciate that. Thank you. So yes, we are agreeable to changing the non-encroachment boundary here to the limit of the 100-foot. I think that pretty much covers the comments. Again, I'm happy to go through. The last comment was related to some details on the stormwater basins. We are currently, we did apply to planning and zoning. We will be adding the required details for the detention basin. The intent of this plan is that the details for the original application for O1A and O2A, the same sections would apply to these and the same details would apply to these. So happy to add those to this plan set, but we are still proposing those same filter beds with the engineered material consisting of topsoil, mulch and sand mixed to promote treatment and infiltration. And again, I think once I get the lab results back, we will see that most of the water from this basin in particular will infiltrate without discharge into those gravelly soils. These soils up here are definitely more silty. So I did not anticipate as much infiltration in this area, but we are providing that filter bed to increase our treatment capacity and filtration capacity. And that is all the comments we received. I did provide those preliminary responses back to Maureen today. I'm sure she's got plenty on her plate, but happy to answer any other questions you may have.
Hi, this is Jessica. One question I do have, you had mentioned for item number 7, to lessen the impact of the surface for where the cul-de-sac is, removing the roundabout curve. I'm just wondering how that will impact EMS and their ability to access that area or turn around if they need to.
So what I'll do is go to the grading plan. And just to kind of zoom in on the area. So right now you'll see we show the curbing continuing all the way around the cul-de-sac and runoff flows to this catch basin here. What we would propose is to maintain the cul-de-sac in its current dimensions and radii. We would simply remove the curbing from the exterior portions of that. So basically it would start generally about here. And this would not be curved. It would simply sheet flow off of the pavement and would still follow the same pattern, but it would be collected naturally through a shallow swale and come down to the same location. So we would be eliminating a collection or a point source discharge, disconnecting our pavement from that point source and allowing it to naturally treat itself as it makes its way towards our detention basin. It would not affect EMS at all. In fact, it'd be a more drivable perimeter because they could, easily get off of the pavement. But the dimensions would be the same for emergency vehicles as well as residents.
Thank you.
Any other questions from commission members? We'll continue this until next meeting. Thank you for your presentation. Go ahead.
Brandon, if you could just before the next meeting, supply me with like cut sheets or whatever we need that so it can that address some of the requests for additional information. And that way I'll have a chance to review them and be all ready with my findings and for the next meeting.
Yeah, I anticipate getting a complete submission back to you early next week.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
and Appreciate that. And I'm going to try to find out how I can unshare here. There we go. Thank you. Take care.
Thank
now.
you. Take care.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, I have one more item on the agenda. It's actually under new apps. We took it as an application. It's a request for under section 4.1 to perform some vegetation maintenance along No Name Brook. If you guys remember where that is, I don't have a map, I'm sorry. It's the little channel that runs through 8th, 7th, 6th, 5th, 4th, Daniels 2nd, Ave, and then down underneath Niantic River Road into the Niantic River. So the applicant, Mrs. Kincasia, she lives at number, okay, do I have that photo? Isn't there, go to where the site map. Did she bring that site map in? Yeah, there we go.
There you go.
Okay, here, let me navigate a little bit. So Mrs. Kincasia lives here. And her neighbor, who's 92 and infirm and housebound, lives here and has a caretaker. So Mrs. Kincasia wanted to clean up the stream. As you know, the stream doesn't exist. It's a pipe on this side. Up here, it's all grass. And so why she sent you all these pictures is that this is what she sees poking through her arborvitae. Yeah, that's a good one too. Okay, so it's tree of heaven. There's a lot of multiflora rose in their site town. A lot of multiflora rose in there. Can you see okay?
Yep.
And then some other invasives. So what she wants to do, oh yeah, here we go. These are my pictures when I first went out to visit with her, is that the stream bottom is still relatively free. And it's this riprap's been there for a long time. I think the town put it in the 80s. So they're not going to be working in the stream channel. They want to cut all the stuff down. They want to do it as a Thanksgiving. Is her letter here? I missed it. They want to do it as a Thanksgiving present to their neighbor. and her kids are gonna be down, and so she asked for permission. I didn't want to give her the permission to be working, that she'll be working right close up to the edge of that swale and knocking that stuff down. And I didn't want to get phone calls over Thanksgiving without you guys having had a chance to either agree or disagree with me that it'd actually be helping the stream out a little bit. And if you would find that this would meet section 4.1 as a maintenance activity. This is about it. This is what she gave us. Joe is the caretaker.
I think it meets the criteria. I was out there today and I spoke with Mrs. Concasia, and, the only thing, as I said, is get the grass clippings out of the.
Yeah, well, she didn't write. Yeah, I told her the same thing, and she said she didn't know they were there. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, it would be a betterment, actually, it's like Lombardi's. Now that that's done, I mean, that's much cleaner. And
Yeah. So anyway, but so under 4.1, there's a residential home, so you can consider that this is a uses enjoyment or maintenance of the property. It's not really maintenance of her property, it's maintenance of her neighbors. But it certainly is a maintenance of an existing riprap channel. She's been pestering the town to do it, and the town says we don't go on other people's property to cut down trees.
right.
And so
I have a
it's gonna
question.
look, when she's done, it's probably gonna look more like, it'll still look like this, but she won't see it poking through all her stuff.
Just a question here, Julie. Should this permit not be issued under the actual address the work is going to be done, even though the work is being done by the neighbor? Is this not a permit we should be doing to this elderly neighbors?
Well, what I'm petitioning first for you to consider is that this doesn't need a permit, that this would be considered a use as of right under section 4.1. And if that's the case, then the letter actually will be copied to the actual owner of the property who lives in New York City, the son. So I guess that's my first thing. If you guys are on board with this as
I'm okay with
as a
that.
Maintenance? Definitely, okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm in agreement, definitely.
I'm in agreement.
Okay.
I'll
That'll make
entertain a
her
motion
happy.
from somebody.
So made.
I'll second it, Jessica.
All those in favor, discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, motion carries. Going on to other business, the monitoring report, wetland restoration, 54 Rope Ferry Road.
Looks like it's doing well. Even though we had some die-offs.
Yeah, it's a good lesson, and even though people always want to plant plugs and everything, when you have such a vibrant, active, thick histosol, like really black mucky soil, it's loaded already with seeds, tubers, and no matter what you put in it, the stuff that's there, including the invasives, are gonna pop right back up. And they kind of wasted some money there, I think.
It looks good, though.
Oh, it's very stable.
Yep.
Okay. Going on to item number 6, payment of the bills.
Make a motion to pay the bills to the day in 201:30.
Second, Geneva.
Second by Geneva. Discussion? Sensing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So made.
Second,
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Thank you and good
Take
night.
care, everyone. Stay healthy.
Have a good
Thanks,
evening. Thank you.
everyone.